All right, let's just jump right into it. For years, decades even, we've been talking about climate finance like it's a cost, a debt we have to pay back. But what if that whole way of thinking is just wrong? Today, we're going to look at a completely different model, one that reframes the entire conversation, and it puts some of the world's biggest investors, yep, the very sovereign wealth funds built on oil and gas, right at the heart of the solution. Not as debtors, but as investors, who are here to complete a massive, historic transaction.
This one idea right here, this is the key to everything. It suggests that the same carbon that was pulled from the ground, the carbon that created trillions in wealth, can actually create value a second time on its way back into the earth. So think about that. It's not about atoning for a mistake, it's about finishing the job. This isn't a story about guilt, it's a story about a massive, and I mean massive, opportunity. But, before we can really grasp this new opportunity, we have to understand why the way we're doing things now is basically an economic dead end. We're all stuck in what you could call the climate expense trap. Okay, just look at these numbers for a second. They're staggering. To pull just 10 gigatons of CO2 out of the air every year, which is what we need to do, we're looking at a cost of up to $10 trillion every single year. That's almost 10% of the entire planet's GDP. And for what? For zero financial return. It's just an expense. No government, no economy on Earth can sustain that. It's not a plan, it's a fantasy.
And this slide just nails the core problem. When a company buys a carbon credit, what happens? They pay a fee, they get a piece of paper, and poof, the money's gone. It's a pure expense on their books. They get zero upside from the actual project. The model we're exploring today completely flips that on its head. The investor buys a bond that's backed by a real asset, they get real financial returns, and they own a piece of something that's actually growing in value. The difference couldn't be more night and day. So the big question is, how do we get from that dead-end expense to a value-creating asset? Well, it all starts with changing the way we think about carbon removal itself. We need to stop thinking about a passive sink and start thinking about an active production model. And funny enough, the inspiration for it comes from a technology that's over 2,000 years old. Everybody, meet Terra Preta. It literally means black earth. 2,000 years ago, people in the Amazon figured out how to create this unbelievably fertile soil by mixing in biochar, which is basically a special kind of charcoal. But here's the mind-blowing part. That carbon they put in the soil, it's still there. Terra Preta is the living proof, thousands of years old, that this method of storing carbon in soil is permanent. This isn't a theory, it's history. And this brings us to a really, really important distinction. See, a forest is a carbon sink. It soaks up carbon, sure, but that carbon is always at risk, from fire, from disease. And eventually the forest matures and pretty much stops absorbing carbon. But if you use something like bamboo, you're not building a sink, you're building a carbon factory. You harvest it every single year, turn it into permanent biochar for the soil, and the bamboo just grows right back. The factory never gets full, it just keeps on producing. Okay, so now we take that ancient science and we connect it to modern finance. This is the moment we go from a cost to an asset. And we do it with an instrument called the Bioactive Carbon Bond, or BCB for short. And this number right here, this is what changes everything. A target return of 10 to 15%. Now you're probably asking, how is that possible? Well, it's because that biochar does more than just lock away carbon. It makes the soil incredibly healthy. That means farmers get bigger crop yields, they use way less fertilizer and water, and the land itself becomes more valuable. The investor in the BCB gets a slice of all that real-world economic value. So let's just lay it all out, side by side. A carbon credit, it's a pure cost with zero return. The permanence is iffy, forests burn down, and a lot of the time it's just about avoiding emissions, not actually removing them. A BCB, it's an asset with a solid 10 to 15% return. The carbon is locked away for over 1,000 years, and it actually removes CO2 from the sky. Oh, and maybe the best part? Over 75% of the value goes straight to the farmer. So the motivation here isn't compliance or guilt, it's prosperity. Now, this all sounds incredible, but let's be real. This kind of thing requires a mind-boggling amount of capital. So the question becomes, who on earth is actually positioned to fund this kind of global infrastructure revolution? And the answer? Well, it might just surprise you. It's the sovereign wealth funds, the very funds that were built on extracting hydrocarbons. These funds manage trillions of dollars, which is essentially the stored financial energy of all that carbon we moved from under the ground into the atmosphere. Who better to finance its return journey? And this right here is what we mean by closing the cycle.
Step 1, carbon comes out of the ground, creating immense sovereign wealth. Step 2, it goes into the atmosphere. Step 3, bamboo factories capture it. And step 4, it gets put back into the soil permanently, creating a second wave of value and financial returns. It's the same carbon creating value twice. The transaction is finally complete.
So, what this really offers isn't just a financial model. It's a chance for these nations to completely rewrite their story. It lets them shift from this defensive, almost apologetic position to one of true sovereign leadership. Just listen to the difference. The defensive story is all about apology, right? We're sorry, we'll invest in renewables as penance. But the sovereign narrative? It's powerful, it's confident, it reframes history not as some big mistake, but as just the first half of a transaction. It positions these nations as the master investors who are uniquely qualified to close the very carbon cycle they opened. It's a total game changer. So let's just end on this thought. For so long, the entire conversation around climate has been about sacrifice, about cost, about what we have to give up. But what if everything we've looked at today is pointing to something totally different? A path where fixing our ecology is also the most profitable, most logical investment we can make. What if the solution isn't about paying a price, but about creating shared prosperity?